Hello, I'm Richard from Right Hassle Solicitors. I'm a partner in the private client team that deals with wills, trusts, probate, and various other things that help people mitigate taxes and ensure their wealth goes to their loved ones. This is the first of 6, I hope, if Stevie lets me, podcasts and video podcasts talking about trusts. So this is something close to my heart. I love trusts. Everybody else in my team seems to sort of shy away from them, mainly because I bore them to death talking about them day in, day out. The aim of this series is to really sort of dive deep as to what trusts are and how they can be used. This particular video, this particular podcast, whatever way that you're watching or hearing what I'm saying, is talking about what a trust is. I don't want to talk for too long. But I want you to walk away or move away from this podcast having a good idea as to what a trust is and how it can potentially help you. Now, I could sit down and talk to you for hours about the different types of trusts, the benefits they have, the various different tax implications of using one from the other. But that's not the objective of this. This is simply to get an image in your mind in readiness for the other 5 projects, the other 5 podcasts that we've got upcoming in the next 5 weeks that dive into greater depth about the intricacies and the benefits and the uses. So, rather than keep babbling, let's talk about what a trust is. So how would I describe a trust? Well, I could bore you, as I do my wife and my colleagues, talking about the various bits of legislation that describe the legal relationship between certain people that make this trust. Or I could tell you that a trust is a treasure chest. And that's what it is. That's how I describe it to my clients, and I believe that works the best. So it's a treasure chest that I set up either in my will or during my lifetime. And I've got the keys to that treasure chest and I hand them to my chosen trustees. So these are the people that I trust to look after those assets that sit within that treasure chest and honour my wishes. The trustees holding the keys can open the lid or close the lid. They can take assets out and they can distribute them as they see fit, subject to 1, the way that the trust has been set up and the powers that it contains, and 2, the letter of wishes and guidance that I've offered them. On top of that, I need to provide a list of beneficiaries. So I need to tell my trustees who can benefit from this treasure chest, who they can take the assets out of the trust and hand them to. So these potential beneficiaries might be my spouse, it might be my children, it might be my colleagues at Right Hassle Solicitors. It's not going to be, but it could be. It could be the entire population of Leamington Spa. It doesn't matter. As long as I trust that my trustees will choose the right people subject to my letter over here. So I've got my roles, I've got my trustees, I've got my beneficiaries, and I've given them some good guidance. The trust is the legal arrangement that provides the power to the trustees to manage these assets. What can I put into a trust? Well, anything, in theory. It could be a property, it could be money, it could be investments, it could be a car, it could be my yacht. I don't own a yacht, but I wish I did. It could be anything that I legally own, I can move in to this treasure chest. Now, why might I do that? Well, I might do it on death, because I want to ensure that those assets are left to the right people in a controlled manner. And I want to ensure that my trustees, the people that I've trusted, get those assets to the right people at the right time, subject to and considering the issues that my loved ones might be having at the moment that I die. Not 20 years prior when I made the will, but at the moment when I die. So that's what a trust offers. It's a really clever way of protecting assets. That's what a trust is. It's guaranteeing as far as physically possible that the right people have the right options to choose how my loved ones receive their inheritance at the right moment in time, subject to what might be happening to them. How do I make a trust? Well, as I've already said, I can make a trust in my will, or I can make a trust in lifetime. What are the differences between the two? Well, effectively none. The trust will be exactly the same if I make it in my will or on death. It will either be within the will itself as a couple of clauses, or it will be a standalone document, but it will achieve the same purpose. Now, why might I want to make a trust in my will? Well, I might do that if I want to retain control of those assets until the moment that I die. And then I want to ensure they pass down to the generations in a controlled manner. So that's why I would do it on death. Why, alternatively, might I want to make a trust in lifetime? Well, that's when it gets a little bit technical, a little bit special. That's when I start boring people, because trust in lifetime are a really clever way of, one, protecting assets for my loved ones, or mitigating taxes. So, for example, I might want to give a couple of £100,000 to my son. Now, he's only 5 and I don't have a couple of £100,000, so he's not going to get it. But if I chose to, I could hand him a cheque for £200,000 and he could go away and buy a house. The problem with that is I've lost control of that £200,000. And if something happens to my son, the house is gone. So I've waved goodbye to that money and I've lost the opportunity to control those assets and help my son moving forward. Alternatively, I might set up a trust, move some money into that trust, and then the trustees purchase that property for my son. If something nasty happens to him, the property is as protected as physically possible from the threats that he might face in the future, be that divorce or bankruptcy or care. So it's a way of me passing assets down, but also ensuring, as far as physically possible, that those nasty threats that my beneficiary might face will not touch the assets that I've sort of tried to shield. Tax efficiency. Lots of different types of trust here. Bare trusts, discretionary trusts, interest in possession trusts. All three of them have slightly different tax implications. When it comes to lifetime trusts, the most common types of trusts that people make are discretionary trusts and interest in possession trusts. And it's discretionary trusts that arguably provide the most benefit. And that's because moving assets into a discretionary trust can protect them and mitigate the inheritance tax liability that you might be facing in the future. Now, I'm not going to talk to you about various different examples of how they will save inheritance tax, because that is a very personal situation and it requires you to sit down with me and to talk about your total circumstances. The tail should never wag the dog, so the saying goes, when it comes to tax. If you haven't got an inheritance tax liability, don't plan to mitigate inheritance tax. But if you do, trusts are a clever way of mitigating them. And as I said, in future videos and podcasts, we'll be talking about lifetime trusts and the different types of products that you can prepare that will hopefully mitigate your exposure and potentially reduce the amount that's going to be lost to the taxman. So trusts provide flexibility, control, tax mitigation, and choice. They're the 4 things I would say a trust offers you. Not a lot of people use them, which is quite frustrating for me. I always say to my clients when they sit down and make a will, you should never be leaving anything to anybody. Now, what I mean by that is, why would I choose to leave assets to my son? Absolutely. Why would I give something to my son, not knowing what his circumstances will be in 40, 50, 60 years' time? I occasionally flutter on the horses at Cheltenham and I might put a bet on Peterborough United, although I always lose, but I'm not a gambling man. And because I'm not a gambling man, I want to hedge my bets. And the best way for me to hedge my bets when it comes to tax and protection is to effectively say in my will and in lifetime, if I'm going to give anything to anybody, I'm going to try and wrap it up in a treasure chest. If their circumstances are correct, if my son's circumstances are perfectly fine at the moment I die, he can have those assets. If they're not, for whatever reason, they can be wrapped up and protected for his benefit moving forward. That's what a trust offers: protection and tax efficiency. I hope you'll stick with this series of podcasts, because as I say, we're going to dive deep into the various different types of trusts available to you and how they can benefit you in lifetime and on death. I'm also going to be doing various different small snippet vlogs about the different types of trusts that are out there that can be useful subject to the types of assets that you have in your name. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening.